Good evening, and hopefully we are broadcasting without any glitches. But so, Mark, am I sounding like a squirrel or a chipmunk, or am I coming through fairly decent? So I've got Mark in the room here with me, and we are getting ready. Okay, Tim, I see you showed up. Am I sounding all right? Is the sound okay? Or are we sounding like a gerbil? Oh, great. I sound good. And that's a rarity, but nonetheless, we will launch. Good evening, and welcome to another The Miracle Within, an examination of A Course in Miracles, kind of an introduction to the book. And here is the book, the big book, the book that has all the answers that you've been looking for. And hello to Carla. Happy New Year, Sean. And sounds great in Canada. That's good to hear. You guys up in Canada are probably getting a little bit of a cold blast. I know we down here have had intermittent, really frigid conditions, and Fort Lauderdale, I think, or St. Augustine, somewhere in Florida, was getting snow today. So that's what it's all about in this ever-changing, illusionary world. And, you know, one of the things is that really all of the environment, all of the conditions that surrounds us is a thank you, Tim. Yes, happy New Year to you as well. But this material world is a projection of our consciousness. And when we're having chaotic weather, when weather is moving in extremes, that's just a sounding board. It's reflecting back to us what's going on in the collective consciousness. So all of these different elements come together where we cannot avoid looking at life from that level of truth. And the truth is, we are not victims of the world we see. And that's what the Course in Miracles explains to us over and over and over again. It's all contained within the mind. And what our collective mind is reflecting back to us right now is, very frigid weather, the winter, and the period of germination when everything is at a point of cessation. So for this first launch into 2018, I thought we might take a look at Chapter 9, the acceptance of the atonement. And, the atonement is the ultimate level of union. It is getting past the illusion of separation. So we step out of our fear space and we step out of our concerns about what truth in life really is and allow the divine within us, the presence of God within us, to explain to us what our life really is all about. So the atonement is that state of union where there is no longer a sense of God and me. There is simply an immersion into the awareness that there is God, and that's as far as you can go with that thought. So our divinity is assured to us and is held in the mind and eye of God through eternity. So no matter how much of a screw up it may appear that we are making in this lower realm, the truth is that God is always present with us in every activity, in every endeavor, in every experience that we have. And that's the one thing that keeps us in that state of expectation, of fully awakening to the truth. And the truth is that we are eternal spiritual beings. There is no death, there is no end of life, there is no cessation of us. But there can be the experience of an illusion of death. And so that's why we keep pulling ourselves back to the atonement, this moment of recognition that there is no separation between us and life itself. So starting off with chapter 9, the first section here is called the acceptance of reality. Fear of the will of God is one of the strangest beliefs the human mind has ever made. And how many churches and mosques and synagogues and temples preach this litany of a fear-mongering and a fear-inspiring God. So we really have to look at that and recognize that this material world has painted a picture of God that is based on fear and retribution and death and destruction. And nothing could be further from the truth. So it says, it could not possibly have occurred unless the mind were already profoundly split. What does that mean? The split in the mind. The conscious mind, which is what we're engaged in here when I'm talking to you, we're all doing this from the level of consciousness. And then there is the subconscious mind, that part of the mind that is suppressed because we're afraid to look at all the things that are contained in that mind. We have this fear of having to confront all of the things that we believe that we did to ourselves and to each other. So it goes on to say, making it possible for it to be afraid of what it really is. So the mind has this tremendous level of fear about its own identity. And that's what we're focusing on. That's what we are attempting to heal, so that there is no longer this separate part of the self that is buried, that is unknown. And of course, a lot of our surprises in life come from that part of the mind that is suppressed and that we're unaware of. So next time you fall down a flight of stairs, you can say, well, some of those darker things that I have been suppressing, instead of bringing into the light and looking at with forgiving eyes, caught up with me, tripped me on the stairs. And how often does that happen? Throughout our lives, it's just an ongoing litany of experiences that are based on the fear that we have of our own truth. So, reality cannot threaten anything except illusions, since reality can only uphold truth. And that's, fundamental. Truth is truth. Reality is truth. The very fact that the will of God, which is what you are, in other words, God has willed you into existence. You're not an accident. You're not a random phenomenon in a chaotic universe. You came into being as a result of God's design. And he did not design a human body. What he designed was a spiritual being that is perfect in every aspect, perfect on every level of consciousness. So it says, very fact that the will of God, which is what you are, is perceived as fearful, demonstrates that you are afraid of what you are. It is not, then, the will of God of which you are afraid, but yours. See, so the way that we have twisted understanding, twisted reality, twisted our perception of who we are is really quite devious, because what it has managed to do is completely obscurificate truth from us. And, there are a lot of people out there running around saying, invent yourself, reinvent yourself, create yourself. These are all lofty ideals from the material realm. The truth of the matter is that God created you perfect. So why would you want to create a separate sense of self, a separate identity that resides apart from God? So we really are, looking at things from the most basic level, getting down to the foundation of our belief system here. As we continue, the second paragraph, it says, your will is not the ego's, and that is why the ego is against you. So this person that you created, this ego identity, in its very inception, was on the attack. It wanted to take control and to eliminate you as a spiritual being. It wanted to ground you in the body, make you vulnerable to every bug that came along. This is a season of flu and colds and all these things. And we also imagine, I caught the flu from Joe Blow that was standing next to me on the bus. The truth is, it's that ongoing exercise of the ego that is attempting to ultimately destroy you, because it believes that it can survive on its own. Pardon me here. The dog just joined us. We now have a 110-pound German Shepherd who is very much into A Course in Miracles. So he's found a place in the room to sit down and listen to my dialogue here. How cool is that? So anyway, as we continue, it says, it is impossible to learn anything consistently in a state of panic. And that's generally, on one level or another, the way we exist. That's the condition of our existence. It's right below the surface, but anything can bring it to the surface. So you have a rear end collision on the freeway. You have a report from your doctor's office that says your white blood cell count is non-existent. You have all these different things that arise in the course of a week or a month or a year that throw you into a panic, and then you suppress the panic. But it's there right below the surface at all times, because that's what the ego's job is. And the ego is very committed. It is very devoted to this job. All this can mean is that you are arbitrarily associating something beyond your awareness with something you do not want. So that's why we have the subconscious. That's why there's this hidden realm. We suppress all these things. We give ourselves all these different reasons to live in a state of fear, and then we try to ignore the fear. So it's very, very devious, the way that we have set ourselves up to experience this imaginary world apart from God. It is evident, then, that you are judging something of which you are totally unaware. You have set up this strange situation so that it is impossible to escape from it without a guide who does know what your reality is. And that's, that component that God infused into our being, called the Holy Spirit. And that is the guide. That is the voice for God. That is the way back into a higher state of reality, a true reality. The purpose of this guide is merely to remind you of what you want. So the Holy Spirit is always there. And even when you're making the worst possible decision in a specific situation, if you will silence all your brain chatter, that presence, that Holy Spirit within you will say, well, maybe it's time to make a different decision. Maybe it's time to rethink this and decide again. So we're never without the guidance, but it's up to us to come to a point where we comprehend that we can't hear that voice as long as we're allowing our mind to engage in this ongoing rampage. So that really is, a major set of images to start off the new year with, to get ourselves to the point where we are bringing the ego under control and starting to still that brain chatter so that we can actually hear the guidance that is coming through to us from our divine source. It says he, the Holy Spirit, is not attempting to force an alien will upon you. He is merely making every possible effort within the limits you impose on him to reestablish your own will in awareness. So basically, this is telling us that our will, our true will, as we exist in our state of divine perfection, is the same as God's will. Now, we've got all these agendas that the ego sets up and that we run off in pursuit of. And those things are the things that lead us down these paths to self-undoing. And that's what we have to be constantly alert to, is, is this journey that I have just initiated going to take me to a place of peace, or is it going to take me to ongoing chaos? And how often do we choose for chaos unwittingly? Okay, so it says, you have imprisoned your will beyond your own awareness. And throughout the course, it is reinforced over and over again that our will is the most powerful force in the universe. Now, if we are putting our attention on attack and chaos and confusion and obscurification, because of the potency of our will, we'll manifest that. So it is by your own will that you are confused. It is by your own will that you are suppressed or oppressed. It is by your own will that you are a victim to life on every level. And you really have to look at that and start taking ownership of, this fundamental truth of who we are, how we were created, and what our destiny is. And our destiny is to awaken from this illusion. Pardon me, it's been a dry day here. We've had the heat on all day, and that creates a little bit of cotton mouth. I'm sure that you've experienced that yourselves. Anyway, it says, when I said that the Holy Spirit's function is to sort out the true from the false in your mind, I meant that he has the power to look into what you have hidden and recognize the will of God there. So the Holy Spirit's function is to basically remove these veils. It's just an ongoing process. We put up this veil of illusion, and then we embrace it, and we live in a state of fear and frustration. So what we have to do is allow the Holy Spirit that option to exercise that function in our consciousness, where these veils are lifted and we're starting to see truth for the truth that it is. His recognition of this will can make it real to you because he is in your mind, and therefore he is your reality. If then his perception of your mind brings its reality to you, he is helping you to remember what you are. Not who you are, but what you are. That's an interesting concept also, because that moves us away from a reliance on gender identity. We get so caught up in the basic level of duality. The first level is God and something else. So God and man, or God and woman. That's where the first level of duality sprang from. The next level of duality is masculine, feminine. So God didn't make men and women. God basically because of God's, awareness that God is all, essentially created us as all that is. In other words, we are God within God, and we have to be willing to step back from all these different levels of separation and duality that we have created in our own mind. And that's what the Holy Spirit is here to help us do. He goes on to say, I have emphasized many times that the Holy Spirit will never call upon you to sacrifice anything. But if you ask the sacrifice of reality of yourself, the Holy Spirit must remind you that this is not God's will, because it is not your will. In other words, your will and God's will are so perfectly attuned that there is no split. There is no separation in your true will from God's will. And God's will is basically love. That is the foundation of God. God is life. God is love. So for those of us living in a realm where we believe in death, and where we believe in the lack of love, and where we believe that there are evil people, or we imagine ourselves to be an evil person, we are basically in violation of our own true will. And again, the only way this could happen is if we created an ego that is separate and apart from God. So this little ego mind is always busy trying to impress us with the idea of the separation that can never be reconciled. And of course, the truth is the Holy Spirit will communicate to you that the separation never really occurred. You fell asleep, you had a bad dream, and now it's time to start to awaken. So, but if you ask the sacrifice of reality of yourself, the Holy Spirit must remind you that this is not God's will, because it is not your will. There is no difference between your will and God's. If you did not have a split mind, you would recognize that willing is salvation, because it is communication. So everything is contingent on unsuppressed communication. And that's a big part of the ego's journey in this material world. We have our private thoughts. We have this little world that is a bubble that we live in, where we can imagine ourselves to be separate. And we have all these thoughts about, Mary down at the end of the street is an idiot and a floozy, and Joe across the street is a moron, and he's a this and a that, and we've got all these different ways of attacking and diminishing, and at the same time lifting up our ego and making us the hero of this dream that we have created. So as the Holy Spirit starts to catch our attention more and more and more, we begin to recognize what we're doing. We're attacking everyone around us, and everyone around us is us. There is no separation. So the split in the mind is really the only problem that has to be addressed. It is impossible to communicate in alien tongues. You and your Creator can communicate through creation, because that, and only that, is your joint will. Well, what is that creation? That is the ongoing process of projecting the self of God forward. So we are God within God, creating God and projecting that God forth. And what is God? God is love. God is life. So the true self, the person that we actually are, is engaged in this ecstatic experience of consistently throughout eternity projecting itself into eternity. So we are creating, this goes back to that idea of having children. And many of us in this realm have this desire to have a child, or to have many children, or to nurture children. You know, we're always consumed by this idea of creation. And the true creation is a process that is so magnificently unbridled, uncontained by mere human bodies and by mere one-on-one experiences. In other words, this is my kid, and you know, my kid had this kid, so this kid is my grandkid, and we've got all these different little levels of separation. But imagine experiencing a state of communion / creation where you are sharing God throughout eternity in all directions. That's what true parenting really is, and that's what our true state of being actually is. We've just forgotten that. A divided mind cannot communicate because it speaks for different things to the same mind. This loses the ability to communicate simply because confused communication does not mean anything. A message cannot be communicated unless it makes sense. How sensible can your messages be when you ask for what you do not want? Yet as long as you're afraid of your will, that is precisely what you are asking for. So launching into 2018, you know, all of a sudden we're arriving at a point where the option has arrived, it has arisen, of focusing in this lifetime, in this journey, in this coming year, on that one supreme goal, which is healing the mind, resolving that split in consciousness, stepping out of a state of duality, and awakening to the truth that we are held in perfection in the mind and eye of God throughout eternity. So imagine that. Imagine what the possibilities could be if you could recognize that all of those fear areas hidden in the subconscious are not based on truth or reality. They are simply an illusion that you created through your ego to generate fear and suppression, and to keep you in this state of keeping the ball in the air. That's the ball of ego, which is just bouncing all over the place. So anyway, we're winding down the half hour here. I hope that some of these thoughts may pique your interest, and that you may, in fact, go out and pick up a copy of A Course in Miracles. And if you're really, really lazy, or if you just don't want to go out in sub-zero weather, go online, because you can find A Course in Miracles available to you, free to read. So, starting off the year, the workbook in A Course in Miracles gives us a lot of very powerful tools to work with as far as resolving the split in our consciousness, healing this place where we have turned our fear of love into a very dark journey. And maybe 2018 can be that year where you step out of the darkness, where the light starts to come in underneath the door, slips in over the windowsill, comes at you from some direction, you know, and you're projecting it all outside. But the truth is, it's trying to come from within you. That spark is right here. You know, it's right here within you. And if you pursue that spark, it will start to gain ground, and it will become a flame, and that flame will turn into a light that will light your path throughout eternity. You can step back into your truth. So you guys get out there, share the love, pass the love around. Please do consider starting the year with the lessons from A Course in Miracles. There's stuff on Facebook, there's stuff on the internet. You can find tons of support. And every Wednesday evening, you can join me as we look at another section of A Course in Miracles. And may you and all of the people you love and all of the people you hate and all of the people that inhabit this planet with us be blessed and be awakened as we move forward in the illusion of time. So get out there, share the love, pass the love around, and I will speak to you again in 1